All right. Good morning, everybody. So we left off for yesterday's blot. Is Daf Yudalad. So today, Mitzvah Hashem will do Yudalad and Tezvav. Sugya called Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim. Basically, 7 blot referring to a lot of Tuma Tahara talk. So we'll go through the sugyas. Some will be harder than others. But the good thing is, it goes to the end of the parak, and then obviously it switches back. So let's see. So the Mishnah on the top of Yud Dalet Amud Aleph, 5 lines from the top. Rabbi Chanina, Skana Kohanim, Aimer, Miyameim Shel Kohanim, Lo Nimnu Milisrov Es Habasar Shenitma B'Vlada Tuma. Im Habasar Shenitma B'Ava Tuma. Af Al Pisha Meisvin Tuma Al Tumasa. So that was the first statement. The first statement was a statement of Rabbi Chanina, Skana Kohanim. You also have to see the breakdown of the Mishnah as the Gemara, which afterwards will sort of discuss the, the discussion of our Mishnah. So the first part of the Mishnah was a statement of Rabbi Chanina, Skana Kohanim. We said that during the days in the Beis Hamikdash, when they used to go ahead and burn basar, when they have to burn basar, which became tameh. So in this case, so these always have to burn any leftover meat or whatever because you couldn't just dispose of it. You have to burn it. So there's another issue. The issue is going on is you're not allowed to make kachim tameh. Not allowed to make kachim tameh. So the question really is, can you go ahead and also we're going to see how this plays back into Pesach, what the shaykhus is. So they. Right? They did not stop. In other words, they did it. In other words, they did not do it. Right? Burn basar that became tameh from a vlad of a tuma. Now l'chayra, right? There's different levels of tuma. There's an ava tuma, right? The original source of tuma, such as a corpse, such as a sheretz. Other cases, those are sources of tuma. And those cases, so they did not go ahead and burn, right? They didn't have 2 separate fires. They would burn something that became tameh from a vlad. Now a vlad tuma, right? At most a vlad is a rishon, right? And therefore something of that would be a sheni. So they would burn that with something that became tameh from an avatuma. From a rishon, the Gemara will ask also. So, you're worried about this, touching something that came from a vlad, right? A vlad is only, it would make it a sheni. So we wouldn't burn something that came from an avatuma, which is a rishon, with a sheni. The Gemara will explain why we can't do that. So that was one case. They would basically go ahead and burn them together. All right, that was case A. All right, so it's 2 things that were tameh, even though they were not the same level of tuma. They would burn them together, even though there was a chance they would make contact and one become more tameh in the fire before it gets destroyed. And Haisif Rabbi Kiva added a second case. They would not refrain from lighting oil that became possible from a tful yom. So a tful yom is someone who is tameh, who went to the mikvah that day. He has to wait till the sun goes down, right? So so basically the oil that he came in contact with would be a level of tuma. We'll have to see in the Gemara. And they would use that oil and they would put it in a nair, in a candle, right? That became tameh by tumas meis. Even though it would add to the level of tuma. In other words, even though it would add to the level of tuma, they would still go ahead and put it inside this nair. Right, so that was the first 2 cases. Hold on 1 second. I'm just shedding a sweatshirt for another sweatshirt. All right, this is how I do. It's all about layers. All right, fine. So that was the case. Fine. Now let's see. So then the Mishnah goes on and says, Omar and Meir, says Rameir midivrehem, from their words. Now l'chayra, it's playing off. Right, Midivrehem Pashtus is that the words from Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim, from his testimony, and from the testimony of Rabbi Akiva. So Amar Meir Midivrehem, from their words, Lamanu Shesarfim Truma Tahira Ima Tmeya Pesach. So what is the issue? What's the shaykhus of Pesach? Now we're bringing it back in. So we have to go ahead and burn our chametz that we've been discussing, and we've also been discussing the intricacies of burning truma. One is not allowed to go ahead and burn truma, destroy truma tahira, right? Unless, right, it becomes during a zman of when it has to be destroyed, right? During the 6th hour. So he says over there that you can go ahead and burn the truma tahira with truma temeya, right? L'chara, by putting the truma tahira, the pure truma, with the truma tameya, right? You are making the truma tahira now tame while it's being burnt, right? You're allowed to do that b'Pesach. So that was Rabbi Meir, right? So Rabbi Meir says midivreham, l'chara is referring to Rabbi Chneskan Kohanim and referring to the words of Rabbi Kiva. And Amar Rabbi Yosi, and says Rabbi Yosi, the apply on that, Einohi Hamida, right? That's not the same thing, right? That's not the same thing. You're not comparing apples to apples. We also have to understand why Rabbi Yosi argues with Rabbi Meir, saying, no, you don't just have a green light to go ahead and burn Truma Tahira with Truma Tameya. Umaydim Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, and both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua admit, right? That they go ahead and they burn each one separately. So you have two separate pyres, you have two separate fires, one for the Truma Tahira, one for the Truma Tameya, because you can't go ahead and be metame the Truma Tahira, even though you're destroying it, you can't be metame it. So Alma Nachlaku, right? So what do they argue about? Alatuluya Tameya. They argue about something which is tuluya, something which we don't know. It's a suffix, right? Is it tameh? Is it tahor? So normally something is tameh tahor. You can't just go ahead and eat it because it might be tameh. You can't go ahead and just burn it and destroy it because it might be tahira. So the halacha really is you wait till Eliyahu Navi comes to go ahead and decide or in paskin whether this is tameh or tameya or tahira, and it says Rabbi Eliezer says you burn each one separately. You still can't include the suffix with the vadai. And Rabbi Shua you can burn them all together. So that was the Mishnah, the beginning of the sugya. Now, let's go ahead and try and understand first the Mishnah. Not Michdi. So let's go. So basar shenitma b'vlad hatuma ma'havi. So any basar that became tummy from a vlad hatuma. So vlad hatuma sounds like something that comes from the vlad itself, right? Vlad refers to like an offspring, right? So it's something that basically was an offspring of tuma. Obviously, it came in contact with an avatuma. So something which touches an avatuma is a rishon l'tuma, is the first level of tuma. Obviously, the first level after the av, right? So what is that? Something that touches it. So sabasa shenitna b'vladatuma. So anything that touches something that of vladatuma. So anything that touches a rishon, what is that? It's a sheni. So kisarfle bahadi basa shenit bavatuma my havi. So understand. So if that's a sheni, so if it touches something that touched an avatuma, right? Something that touched avatuma is a rishon. So that would be a sheni. My havi is a sheni. So sheni v'sheni my haisif lo tuma tumasoika. What's the problem, right? Now, what you're burning a something, right, that came in contact with a with a rishon, so that's become a sheni. It already is a sheni. So what are you adding to it? What's the chashash? So we're not talking about a vlad meaning something that was a sheni. We're really talking about that something that was a vlad of a vlad. It's something that came in contact by kachim. We have even more levels because the holier something is, the more levels of tuma can even go down to revi, right? So something that touched a vlad of a vlad. In other words, it's a shlishi, right? And therefore, basically what he's testifying is that they used to go ahead and burn a shlishi with a rishon, in other words, making the shlishi into a sheni. So that was one understanding. Well, first of all, you have a problem, right? Eichel doesn't necessarily make eichel tameh, right? You have liquids that can make it eichel, or oichel that can make a tameh, right? But you don't have liquids with liquids and food with food, right? You might think that food can go ahead and make food tameh, tamalema. Therefore, it says v'chiyutan mayim al zera v'nafam minivleisam alav tamehu, right? It says over there. And if water was placed, right, al zera, right, on a seed, which is food, right, right, and then over there, that if that water was came from a nevela, that is tameh, So who tummy vein Isaac but tummy. It says and only over there, right? That can make it tummy, but food cannot, right? But tummy, but food can make it tummy. So you see that food can't go ahead and make it food. So how can this shlishi with the rishon, right, become a sheni? First of all, it's not a problem according to Abaye. But according to him, truma and kachim can become tummy from eichel. And even from Ravada Barav Mishmei the Rava Nami Damar also according to him is loishanu elo chulun truma. But even according to him, not only chulun but even truma, it's not eichel but kachim. You can't have food and food shapir. El Ravina Mishmei the Rava Damar. Mikra Mali Dibra Hakasuv. Loishna Chulin, Loishna Truma, Loishna Kachim. But according to Ravina, the name of Rava, that the pasuk is talking about everything, doesn't make a difference whether Chulin or Truma or Kachim. Since over there, according to him, right, that none of them food cannot make it food. So once again, we get back to the kasha. How can the food of shlishi become tamei from food from a rishon? So my answer is because there was also liquid. It wasn't basar. There was liquid on top of the basar of the rishon. And therefore become tummy because of the liquids, and therefore the shlishi could potentially become a sheni. And nevertheless, they would do it together since it was already tummy. It was just tummy different levels. They're allowed to go ahead and increase its tuma. If that's the case, it shouldn't have said with the basar that became tummy from abatuma. It should have said with basar and liquid that came from abatuma. So he says, no, okay, even if it's just eichel, maybe we're saying that even though midoraisa from the pasuk, yes, food cannot be mitami other food, but midorabanan it could be, and therefore, since midrabanan, it could be it's only midrabanan, therefore it'd be mutter to go ahead and burn them together. Fine. So that was the understanding of Rabbi Chanina Skan HaKohana. Now, 2 dots. Next case. So that was case A. Remember, there was case A, case B, and then there was comes Rav Meir and says from the words we want to say this by Pesach, and Rabbi Yossi says not a good comparison. That was the layout of the Mishnah. Now. So he brings the quote from the Mishnah where it says, now, once again, analyzing the case of the oil, putting oil that was touched by a tful yom into a ner that was metami betumas meis. Let's see. So shemen shenifsel b'tful yom my havi a shemen that became puzzled by from the touch of a tful yom. What is that? That is a shlishi, right? Because a tful yom is like a sheni. And therefore, if he would touch something, the shemen would become a shlishi. That would be a sheni. So my kamashmalan. So what do you come and teach me? That you're allowed to go ahead and make a shlishi into a sheni, right? So my kamashmalan shlishi butula sheni. Hainohach. That was the same as the previous case. So Rabbi Yehuda, Hacha Bener Shamatachas Askinan Derachmana Amar. Over here, we're talking about a case of the candle, right? The ner, right? That was made of metals, right? And therefore, the Rahman Amar and the Torah says, or turn the page, right? It says Bechalal Cherev, right? If someone, I guess, became, he was killed or by a sword, right? Cherev Hareyu Kechalal. So therefore, it says over there, a sword is just like the body since it's made of metal. V'havile avatuma. And therefore, right, something that came in contact with a sword is not necessarily the first level, but rather it's an avatuma. It's not a rishon. It's even an avatuma. And therefore, since the ner shamatachas is not considered to be a rishon, rather it's considered to be an avatuma. Right, so learning from the pasuk that if there is a knife or a sword, right, that killed, right, a corpse, right, and that metal touches something else, that doesn't make it into a rishon. We're not talking about teaching you that shlishi can be combined with a rishon to become a sheni. Rather, a shlishi can go ahead and touch an avatuma. And therefore, since it touched an avatuma, therefore you have now a bigger jump from a shlishi into a rishon, and it's teaching you shlishi rishon. Therefore, it's coming to teach you that you can make it into a Rishon. So why are we forced? Why is he forcing himself to go ahead and explain this case that we're talking about a ner, a candle of ma'atechas? Right now, remember when we say ner, right? You have to remember that the ner were it held it like it was the part of the the menorah, the whole thing. It wasn't just like we have just the candle nowadays. It's that which holds the oil, right? So he says nukva b'ner shacheres. Why don't you say it's considered to be cheres, and therefore it doesn't have a lacha where it's an avatuma, rather it's referring to some which is a cheres, right, made of earthenware. Well, my haisiv, and therefore what's the addition over here? The ilu hasam tami v'tami. Over there, in the case of the basar, both of them were considered to be tami. However, ilu hacha, but over here, pasul tami. Over here, right? We're talking about oil. The oil, it was a shlishi, right? It has no ability to be matami other things. Therefore, it's only considered to be pasul, and combining that with tami. So Rava says, the Rava says, no, I'll tell you why we said it was a case of ner shamateches. Masnis and kashyase, right? Because the Mishnah, right, was problematic in the first place. So Ma'ir detani ner shanitma batami meis, right? Why did it say in there bedafka in a case of matami tumas meis, right? If we're talking about a source of tuma, nisni shanitma b'sheretz, say it was in contact with the sheretz. It's Ella, rather why? So why did it say a case of tummy mace, right? So what is something that is a nafkamina as to whether it's matami tumas mace or tami tumas sheretz, right? That is referring to something made out of metal. So therefore, because if it was a sheretz, right, then it doesn't make a difference, right, what it was. But why did the dafka say tumas mace? The dafka said tumas mace to tell you that we're talking about a case of matechas, right, which is different when it comes to a tumas mace versus a sheretz. If a sword touches a sheretz, then it touches something else. It doesn't make that into an avatuma. It makes that, right, into a rishon, right? So therefore, because of that case, the dafka said tumas mace and did not say sheretz, therefore they're referring to that case. And Amarava, and on that says Rava Shmamina. Let's learn Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva must hold. Remember, Rabbi Akiva was the one who brought in the second case. Tumas mashkin the tameachem de'oraisa. We also must go ahead and say that any tuma, right, tumas mashkin that would touch others is de'oraisa. The isakulas derabanan. If it's derabanan, so michdi. Now, once again, you have to analyze it. So hi near Maika Mahania la hi shemen. Right. So over here, right, if the fact that the ner, right, what would it do to the oil, right? So ilaf sule gufe high pasivakai, right? If it just passels it, then it's already considered, it was already pasul, right? Because there's already something that was touched by its full yom, right? So therefore, right, we must say that that therefore it's not just that it's pasul, it must be that it's becoming to be because it was already nifsal. It's coming to tell you that it was nifsal midoraisa. So Gemara says, maybe it's only becoming tami midorabanan. So Gemara says, imidorabanan ma'ir bi'avatuma, right? Afilu berishon b'sheni nami tchila havi, right? If that's the case, only talking about the Rabbanan, why do you have the Badafka say a case of the Ner was in contact with the Avatuma, right? Say we're talking about a Rishon Hashemi, right, which is also Tchila, and therefore they have the ability with the Rabbanan to go ahead and pass others. The Tanan is learning in the Mishnah, Kalapaisos at Truma, Matami Mashkin Liyas Tchila, right? Anything that passes Truma, right? It's matame those liquids in order to become a tchila chutz mitzvah yom, except for tefillah yom. And since over here we're talking about a tefillah yom, he wouldn't have the ability to go ahead and be matame it. So therefore, ela shmamino deraisi. Therefore, it must be right, as we suspected in the beginning, that we're talking about that's tuma deraisa, and therefore it has the ability to go ahead and be matame the oil to be a tuma deraisa. Fine. So those were the first two cases. The first two cases, as we have it right now, Rabbi Chinas Kohanim was talking about making a shlishi, right, into a rishon, right, and or making a shlishi coming in contact with a rishon to make it a sheni. And the other case of the lamps, go ahead and make it into a rishon. And that was even a shlishi into a rishon, and that was on a deraisa level. Fine. And then we have in the Mishnah, just looking back in the Mishnah, and Rabbi Meir says, oh, from their words, right, Midivrehem, right, you must be able to go ahead and burn Truma Tahira with Tameya on Pesach. That was what he said. Now there's going to be a couple, and then Rabbi Yossi says, not a good comparison. So we have to understand now what Rabbi Meir was saying, what he thought, why it was comparable, to which case, and Rabbi Yossi's issue with that. So now let's see the Gemara, 2 dots. Umidivrehem. We're around, 7 lines from the bottom on Yud Daled Amud Beis. So Amar Rav Meir Lamdaina v'chulei. So Midivrehem Dama. So from whose words? He says from their words. So Ilema Midivrei Rabbi Chinas Kana Kohanim. If you want to say it's from the opinion, from the words, the testimony of Rabbi Chinas Kana Kohanim, Midami. How can you go ahead and compare the two? Hasam Tami v'Tamei, Hachat Tar v'Tamei. Over there, even in both cases, or even in the first case, we're talking about 2 things that are already Tameis, just different levels of Tuma, but both of them were Tamei, as opposed to over here, right? The Truma, right, of Chametz before Pesach, right? We said the Truma is Tahira, right? We're talking about something which is completely Tahira and saying that, oh, we can go ahead and burn that with something that is Tameya, right? Maybe it's the second case of Rabbi Akiva. Once again, Midami. Hasan Pasal Tame. Over there, we're talking about oil that was pasul and go ahead and burning in a lamp that was Tame. And nevertheless, since it's pasul, you can go ahead and burn it together. Hachatar v'Tame. Once again, over here, right, this Truma Tahira, burning it or mixing it with Truma Tameya. So Nemak Saber Meir Masnis and Bava Tuma Deraisa Uvlada Tuma Derabanan. Maybe we can say, right, that Rav Meir holds that the Mishnah is talking about an avatuma is deraisa, right? That when we talk in the first case of, right, he says, burning meat from a vladatuma with basar shenitma be'avatuma, right? So that was the case of the Mishnah. So maybe we can say that the Mishnah was talking about avatuma deraisa, uvladatuma derabanan. And the vlad of the tuma, that which we're going to go ahead and burn it, the shlishi was only derabanan, right? Deraisa tar me'alya, that really on a deraisa level it's considered to be tahor, and therefore on a deraisa level, something which is tahor, you can go ahead and burn it with something that is tummy, right? On a deraisa level, one meat was tahor, the other meat was deraisa, and telling you that you can burn them together will be the same thing as truma tahira with truma tameya. Well, so the Gemara says, and what does it mean from the words? And therefore, maybe midivrehem means from the words of Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim. So, however, this doesn't stand up. And Amar Reish Lakish Mishum Bar Kapara Mas Nisim Bava Tuma Deraisa Uvlada Tuma Deraisa. Right? He says no. Maybe the Mishnah is talking about Avatumas Deraisa and the Vlada Tumas Deraisa, and both of them have an aspect of Tuma Deraisa. Umay Midivrehem. And what does Midivrehem mean? Nothing to do with the words of Rabbi Chinas Kohanim, and nothing to do with Rabbi Kiva, right? It means Midivrei Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, from the words of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. Now, it seems it's coming out of nowhere, but if you look at our Mishnah, right, as I mentioned, we had Rabbi Chinas Kohanim, then Rabbi Kiva, then comes Rabbi Meir and wants to infer from Midivrehem, and then Rabbi Yossi says it's not correct. And then at the end of our Mishnah says, Umaydim Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua is and now all of a sudden it goes into Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. So maybe we're sort of, have the, the wagon in front of the horses, right? Referring to that discussion of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, and that's what he's talking about. The Ivrahim knows we didn't really introduce them yet, but they're really, they're discussing in the Mishnah, regarding burning stuff that is suffix versus something which is suffix truma, which is suffix tamei suffix tahor, versus something which is completely tahor. Maybe he's referring to those. So Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer. So the Gemara says, "Hi, Rabbi Yeshua." So which Rabbi Yeshua are we referring to learn they can go ahead and burn truma, right, tahira with truma tameya? So hi Rabbi Yeshua, Ile Maha Rabbi Yeshua. If it's this Rabbi Yeshua from another Mishnah, it's not. We learn in the Mishnah. It says of there Chavishel Truma Shenayla Safek Tuma. If you have a barrel of truma that all of a sudden there was a suffix tuma. There was a certain suffix, perhaps someone he touched it, and maybe he might have been tamei, or we don't know which one he touched. There's a suffix around it. So chavit shel truma shenale bo suffix truma. Rabbi Eliezer Aimer im haisa menachas b'machama turfa. If it was in a case of an area where it might become tamei, then in its place if we don't move it, yanchena b'makam amutzna. Right, you go ahead and put it in an area that is covered, right? That is safeguarded. And or if it was uncovered, then go ahead and cover it. In other words, you should go ahead and still continue to guard this truma, even though there's a suffix on it. Because remember, as we discussed earlier, something which is suffix, you're sort of stuck, right? You can't go ahead and use it because it might be tamei, and you can't go ahead and burn it because it might be tahor. So if it's in a suffix area and all of a sudden it's going to become tamei. So he says you should go ahead and guard it. You have to guard it because it's only a suffix. It's not vadai tamei. He says no. You can go ahead and if it was in a place that was hidden and safeguarded, you can go ahead and put it in a place that's not safeguarded anymore. And if it was covered, you can go ahead and uncover it. Okay, so you see over there that's something which is suffix, right? Machloikas. Rabbi Eliezer says you have to keep guarding it, right? And Rabbi Yeshua says you don't have to keep guarding it. So maybe it's this Rabbi Yeshua, right? Rabbi Yeshua said that something which is already a suffix, you're not really obligated to guard it anymore. So maybe from that case, right, we see there's this leniency of Rabbi Yeshua that you no longer have to protect it. So if I no longer have to protect it, then maybe from there I can see that Rabbi Yeshua would hold that I can go ahead and since I'm destroying the chametz anyways, right? The truma which is chametz anyways, I have to destroy it, I have to burn it. I go ahead and burn it together. I no longer have to safeguard it. I only have to safeguard something which is going to last, and something which is vadei tahor. But if there's any sort of doubt with it, or I'm about to go ahead and burn it for Pesach, maybe I can I don't have to guard it anymore. So our answer is no. Me dummy. Who says you can compare the two cases? Hasam grama bialma. Hacha biyadayim. Over there, we're not saying to go here. If you have something which is suffix, you're allowed to go ahead and be mitame it. We're just saying you don't have to guard it anymore, right? You can uncover it, and if it becomes tame now, it becomes tame. But over here, right, you're suggesting you can go ahead and burn the two together. By burning the two together, you're combining them, and since you're combining them, you're actually you're actively making it tame. So that's a big step to say you don't have to safeguard, right? Versus being mitame biyadayim. So therefore, the Gemara rejects this this suggestion and says, no, maybe that's not the case, right? Maybe we're not talking about those two. So Ella ha Rabbi Yeshua, maybe a different Rabbi Yeshua. Well, let's see another Rabbi Yeshua. That's not. We learn in the Mishnah, chavish shel truma shenishbara begas al yaina. If you have a barrel of truma which it was broken, it's not leaking. It's leaking down the gas al yoina. It's on the upper part of the vat. Now, v'tachtaina chulin tamein, and underneath it is chulin, which is tamei. All right, so the bottom is not right. Remember, there is no halacha. You have to go ahead and safeguard chulin. Right, you only have to safeguard truma. Right, chulin can be eaten by anybody, not just kohanim, and therefore there is no violation. And it can even be eaten by kohanim who are tamei. Right, kohanim who are tamei can go ahead and eat chulin. Right, that's tamei, right? But they can't go ahead and eat truma that's tameya because truma tameya is not permissible, right? So Maida, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, they both agree. Shim yachol lahatzil mimena revis b'tahara yatzil. If you can go ahead and grab, let's say, a kli that is tahar, and save at least a revis from the upper one to go ahead and save it, revis tahara yatzil. He should go ahead and save it. But if not, then if the leak is going to persist and he doesn't have any kalim around him, and then all of the truma on top will go into the bottom one. V'im lav, right? Rabbi Eliezer Omer tered v'titami. Rabbi Eliezer says it goes down, flows down, becomes tummy. And don't go ahead and be mitame it, right? and move it away. Even though now once again, if it comes down into the chulin's all destroyed because now the chulin is basically has the same status as truma tameya, and now all of that has to get destroyed. So I can't actively go ahead and be metame the chulin, the truma that's coming down, right? Even though there's no way to save it, right? Because that's broken, that's automatically going to flow in there, and it's all going to be no good, right? And if I go to actively save it, right, I'm actively making it tameh just to save the chulin, right? In Rabbi Shua Omer, af yitzman b'yad, you can go ahead and save the truma because it was going to waste anyways, and at least I saved. I saved the chulin on the bottom. So maybe over there, from this case, that you're allowed to go ahead and you're allowed to go ahead and be mitame, right? Be mitame the truma in this case. So maybe that's the case that Rabbi Shua is talking about. See, hachi hai midivrehem. The dvar of niboile. It's not midivrehem because it's a machlokes in Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Eliezer. Only Rabbi Shua says you can go ahead and save the truma or save the chulin by being mitame the truma, right? Versus, right, Rabbi Eliezer says you can't do anything. You can't actively mitame it. So maybe it means to say it's a hachi kamar. Doesn't mean for me divrei in other words multiple people's opinion. Maybe it just means the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua in his argument with Rabbi Eliezer. And tikanami diktani umayde Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yeshua shmamina. And maybe you can infer from a Mishnah because if you look later in a Mishnah, it says Rabbi Eliezer agrees with Rabbi Yeshua. So in other words, maybe we're only talking about Rabbi Yeshua until now, and then comes Rabbi Eliezer says he even agrees with Rabbi Yeshua in this case. Fine. So let's just take a step back, right? This is complicated stuff. So now, at this point, our understanding of the Mishnah is that Rabbi Meir, right? Now, Rabbi Meir is the one who made the comparison with chametz. He said, well, you see from Rabbi Yeshua over there, in the Mishnah where's the Mishnah? The Mishnah in Trumas, right? So the Mishnah over there in Trumas, so we see that Rabbi Yeshua says you're allowed to go ahead and actively be mitame truma in order to save chulin because it would have gone to waste anyways, right? And from there we learn you can go ahead and only from Rabbi Yeshua's opinion, and from there we see they can go ahead and burn together truma tahira with truma tameya during the 6th hour on Erev Pesach. Now, v'chein Omar Rav Nachman Omar Rav Avua. So too says Rav Nachman. So v'chein Rav Nachman said also the name of Rabbi Ravua Mas Nisan. So our Mishnah is Ba'av Hatuma Deraisa Uvlad Hatuma Deraisa. Right? He says that no, our Mishnah is referring to a case of Tuma Deraisa, with the Vlad Tuma Deraisa referring to the first case of the Basar. Umay b'divrayim medivrei Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yeshua, and referring to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yeshua and the one that we just brought in. So, however,
is chametz tamei?
Chametz is not tamei, all right? But we're going to get to that issue. We're going to get to the issue. Okay. Perhaps something, right? The Gemara is going to jump on that in Amud Beis. That we're going to discuss perhaps something that is aser, like chametz and other things, have a level of tuma d'Rabbanan. It's definitely not tuma d'Oraisa, but it could be that since you're not allowed to go ahead and eat it, it's forbidden to you, right? It's even forbidden for Anah. So maybe there's a level of tuma there, and if there's a level of tuma there, then maybe it's not such a jump that I can go ahead and burn it with other things that are tummy. But we'll have to go. We're going to get to that step. But it's a good question. So Eisvei Rav Rav Nachman, because l'chor at this point, truma that we're burning, we don't think it's tamei at all, right? We're talking about truma tahira, and you can go ahead and burn it. However, Eisvei Rav Rav Nachman Zesakasha Rabbi Yosi. So now let's look at the next step. So Rabbi Yosi says Rabbi Yosi Ein Hanidain Daimel Raya. That which we're learning out, the nidon is not similar to the proof. All right. In other words, your comparison is flawed. It's not a good comparison. Why? Because when they testified as to what they did in the Beis Hamikdash, al ma'idu im al habasar hanitma im al habasar shenitma b'ladatuma shesarfin oisa im habasar shenitma b'avatuma. All right, that we're talking about meat that was metame from vladatuma. They're allowed to go ahead and burn it with meat that became tame from an avatuma. Zet tame, the zet tame, right? Each one of those are tame, all right? And remember, this is Rabbi Yosi replying to Rabbi Meir, right? Oftentimes we have brisas very similar to Mishnayos, and this brisa also has the same sort of mahalach as our Mishnah. Right? Our Mishnah, Rabbi Meir brought in, says, oh, just like that, you can do the same thing, you burn them together on Pesach. And Rabbi Yosi in our Mishnah, just a bridge version, says, Eina hi amida, right? That was his 3 words he says, Eina hi amida, right? It's not a good comparison. This brisa elaborates a little more. Now, and zetami, and imal Hashem and shenif sabat tefillah. If we're talking about you're comparing oil that became possible tefillah shemal also bener shenit tame meis with a candle that was matame betumas meis zet possible zetame, right? Over there, the oil from the tefillah was possible. In other words, that's a lower level of tuma, right? It can't make other things tame, but it itself is possible. It's treated like it's tame, but it can't make other things tame. And the other case is making it is tame. So af anumaidim betruma shenitma belada tuma shesoif naso ima truma shenitma bavatuma. Right? Okay, so now you can go to the next. You want to compare it? Compare apples to apples. Talk about a case of truma that's timeya, right? One level, on a deraisa level from an avatuma versus a truma that became tame from a vlada tuma, that you're allowed to go ahead and burn those two together because both have a level of tuma. But how can you go ahead and burn something which is either suffix or even certainly even tahor? Perhaps Eliyahu Hanavi will come and be matahar it. So how can you go ahead and compare the two? So turn the page. So let's look at another case, right? Ha pigel v'hanaiser v'hatame. All right. Now, pigel. What is pigel? Right. Pigel is a korban, as we saw in Kachim. Right. We struggle with these concepts. For a couple of years, Kachim. Right. So we were discussing pigel. Right. Pigel is a korban that part of the avoda was done with intentions to do it shelo bizmano. Right. And you go ahead and while they're shechting the animal, he thinks he's going to eat it in 2 days. Right. The time is too long, or he's going to go ahead and apply the blood at a later zman where he's supposed to do it. That's called pigel. Even though those are his intentions while doing it, even if he does it, if he corrects his actions afterwards, since his mindset while doing it was pigel intentions, therefore it ruins the karma, right? It has to be destroyed. All right, that's called pigel. Naisar is something that was left over. It was left over beyond zman. It also has to be burnt and destroyed. The hatame, and tame is something which became tame. Everything else about it was good, but it came in contact with tuma. So a pigel naisar tame. You don't burn them together. Why? Because even though those are usser, right? This is sort of getting back to the introduction to what Reuven was asking before. Even those are usser, right? Nevertheless, they're not tame, right? Isser and tuma are 2 different things, right? So pigel naisar about tame. The Beis Shammai says you can't burn them together, right? You can't even make something pigel and nicer, make it tame. You can't make it tame. You have to burn it separately. You have to be destroyed, put it in its own fire, and the tame will be in its own fire. You burn them together. Now, if you think that Rabbi Meir was talking about the words of Rabbi Shua, right? Why, if Rabbi Meir, as we said earlier, was saying his halacha didn't come from that testimony of Rabbi Chanina Kana Kohanim, or it didn't come from Rabbi Kiva. Rather, he was talking about something completely else, about Rabbi Yeshua, talking about saving truma, whether you're actively allowed to save it, even though you're going to be matame it. So what shaychus in this brisa is Rabbi Yosi? Why is he replying with cases of Rabbi Chanina Kana Kohanim and replying with Rabbi Kiva? He should be talking about, if you want to talk about the flawed comparison, he was comparing it to Rabbi Yeshua's case. He was not comparing it to their cases. So why is he mixing apples and oranges, right? Rabbi Meir's din did not come from Rabbi Chanina Kana Kohanim, did not come from Rabbi Kiva. It came from Rabbi Yeshua. So why is Rabbi Yosi coming and saying, "Oh, you're comparing." He's talking about a different case. So Amalei Rav Nachman, Rabbi Yosi lava daite, right? So he says no. Maybe he didn't know, right? Maybe he thought, or maybe there was a mix-up. Maybe Rabbi Yosi argued with Meir because he misinterpreted where Rabbi Meir's source was. Maybe he thought that Rabbi Meir learned his from Rabbi Chanan Kohanim, the Amar Le Anam B'Di Yeshua coming. And then Rabbi Meir says, no, don't ask me. And says, oh, but that's Tameh to Tameh, and over here in our case by Pesach, it's Tahor to Tameh, right? I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about Rabbi Yeshua. And on that, Rabbi Yosef says, no, Rabbi Shua, even according to Rabbi Shua, it's also not a good comparison. Why? Even they agree that if one is tummy, the other one is tahor, right? Then you burn them separately. But then, if that's the case, why do you say it's not a good comparison, right? Midahi. It's a good comparison, right? In other words, one is the case of the chulin. He didn't want to become tameh, so over there you're being metame the truma to save the chulin. It seems to be a good comparison. So Gemara says no. Shani hasam diika hefset chulin. Over there, it's different. Over there, we're talking about there's a hefset to chulin. Since over there you're allowed to go ahead and be metame truma only to save chulin, but over here you're being metame the truma for no other reason, right? You're not saving any chulin, right? You're, we're talking about burning chametz of truma tahira with truma tameya. So there's no saving money in this case. In the case Rabbi Shua learned, you're allowed to go ahead and be metame the truma in order to save the rest of the chulin. So that at least there was a hefset chulin, so you're allowed to go ahead and save it. Over here, there's no difference. So masculine of Yirmiyah, Amesis you have to go ahead and make a separate fire. You have to go ahead and burn extra wood. Maybe burning extra wood is saving, right? That's a hefsin chulin. No, when you're talking about saving a big vat or big barrel of chulin wine, so that's a real savings. But to talk about making an extra fire, that is not big enough of a hefsin to go ahead and permit. According to this, to argue that it's a flawed comparison to permit burning them together. Fine. Next case. I'll continue this case. Further analyzation. Let's see. Omar Rabbi Asi, Omar Rabbi Yochanan, Machloikes b'sheish. The Machloikes we're talking about is during the 6th hour. Now, during the 6th hour, Midaraisa is still mutter, right? It's only the Rabbanan that say that it is only it's the Rabbanan say you can't. It's usher right now, and therefore you have to go ahead and burn it. But during the 6th hour is when we're talking about whether you can go ahead and burn the truma tahira with truma tameya. Aval b'sheva. But if it's during the 7th hour, then divrei hakol sarfin. Everybody agrees. You can go ahead, even not only Rav Meir, even Rabbi Yosi would agree that if it's already after 12 o'clock into the noon, right? Then you can go ahead and burn the truma tahira with the of chametz with the truma tameya of chametz. Now, let's see why. So now this statement was said by Rabbi Yochanan, right? So let's say that Rabbi Yochanan masisim b'avatuma deraisa uvlada tuma derabanan. That maybe the first part of the Mishnah, when Kohanim was talking about, we were talking about something which became tummy from an avatuma, right? Of a deraisa versus a vlatuma derabanan. Umay midivrehem midivrei v'chinas Kohanim. And this is referring to v'chinas Kohanim because in other words, over here, right? Since we're talking about it's only derabanan. Now it's aser, right? Only midrabanan during the 6th hour. So therefore, you have to say that which if you're comparing the two and you're saying the truma during the 6th hour is only pasal midrabanan, not deraisa, and therefore it would be compared to the case of maybe meat that became tameh through vladatuma derabanan, not deraisa. So he says yes, you can do that, and I actually have a brayso to support that. Itamar nami. That our Mishnah, the first case of Kohanim, is referring to an avatuma, deraisa. The one meat that was the more severe meat, which was avatuma from a deraisa, and the vladatum was only midrabanan. It was tame. And then therefore the machlokes over there about between burn, whether you're allowed to go ahead and burn the chulin, the truma altogether, right, is only during the 6th hour of Al B'Sheva. But if it's during the 7th hour, even deraisa, it's aser. And then therefore even deraisa, something which is aser, is like it's tame, then everyone would agree it's like, it's both of them are deraisas, both of them you'd be able to go ahead and burn together. Aval b'sheva, divrei kol sarfin. So everything would be able to burn together. So if that's the case, lim b'sayle, right? Let's say there's a proof to it about that first brisa we brought out on the top of Tesav Avod Beis. Ha pigol v'anoisav atame. When it comes to pigol noisav atame, now, so Beis Shammai says you can't burn them together because they're separate, right? They're different isurim, and they're different isurim. They're not all tummy and the same, and therefore you can't burn them together. But Beis Hillel says you can burn it together, right? We follow Beis Hillel. Now, why does Beis Hillel say you can burn them together, right? One is tamei and pigul and noisar not. So pigul and noisar l'chayra, right, are the same as chametz after into the 7th hour. Why? Because they're both asur midaraisa. If they're asur midaraisa, they're like it's tamei. If they're like it's tamei, you can burn it together with something which is tamei, right? So therefore, right? So let's say that this is a proof, right? Pigul and noisar can go ahead and be burned with tamei. So too, truma tahira into the 7th hour is now considered just like it's tamei, and therefore you can go ahead and burn it together with the others. Everyone would agree in this case. So the rest is no. Shani hasam the isla tuma midraban. Right over there, right? In the case of the chametz, there is tuma derabanan, right? Over there, the case of the pigul and noisar, those are mitame tumas derabanan. Why? The tanana pigul and noisar mitame yadayim. Those are mitame yadayim. Since there is a separate gezerah that pigul and noisar are mitame, it's not just the isser. It's not just because it's usser you can burn it with something that's tame. There's a different aspect. There's even tuma. Right, they attributed tuma to something which is usher, but that was never said by the chametz. Right, it was only said that if a person touches chametz, right, trum or chametz, his hands become tamei. We don't know that, but we have that by pigul noisar. So pigul noisar, if you go ahead and the kohen touch it, they have to go ahead and wash their hands. So therefore, maybe that's why you can burn them together. But who says the same would go ahead and apply, and that would be a proof for burning truma tahira and truma tameya together into the 7th hour. Okay, so let's say another case. Suleim b'sayle, or this case, hapas she'ifsha, right? You have bread that went bad. V'nifsala milechol le'adam, right? You have bread which became gross and moldy, and nifsala milechol le'adam v'kelav yachol lachlo, right? It's still edible. A dog would eat it, but a human would not. So metame tumas eichlin b'kabetza v'nisevas ima tmei v'pesach. It says over there, it's matame tumas eichlin, like kabetza, like the size, it has to be, the shear has to be like that of an egg, and you burn it, right, with something which is tamei and pesach. So you see over here that there is a level of tuma attributed to it. So the rest says, no, shani hasim to offer the almahu. Over there, it's not because it's tamei, right? And therefore, since it's already tamei, you can burn it with other things that are tamei. Rather, the reason is because once it becomes moldy and gross and a person won't eat it, it's like it's dirt. It's like it's destroyed. And therefore, since like it's destroyed, you're not being matame it, right? And therefore, since it's afra be'alma, therefore you can go ahead and burn it together. Fine. Ihaki, if that's the case, right? Why did it say, right, in our Mishnah, right? Once again, playing back to our Mishnah. Well, our Mishnah says, Rabbi Yosef says, Umaydim Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Sesarfin Zoliasa Zoliatzma, right? That they agreed, right? Why do they agree? They can burn it together, right? See, Hachi. So, my Moida, what does it mean, Moida, right? What does it have to do with the case there? So it says, Hachi Kamer Rabbi Yosef Rameir. This is Rabbi Yosef Rameir. Afilu Rabbi Yeshua the Mekel. Even according to Rabbi Yeshua, who is normally Mekel, right? In terms of being able to go ahead and be matame burned together. So ki mekel b'tzliyav tameya. He's only mekel, right, in the case of something which is suffix and tummy. But But if it's tahor and tamei, not just suffix and tamei, but actually tahor and tamei, then you wouldn't be able to go ahead and burn together. See, hachi amai enehi amida, mido midahi, right? But if that's the case, so why do you say that it's not a good comparison, right? It is a good comparison, right? That you should be able to go ahead and burn them together because it's no longer tahira. So Rabbi Yirmiyah, hacha bebasa shenita b'mashkin shenitma machmas sheretz, right? Over here, right? Maybe go back to the first case. That which Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim said was, we're talking about a case of meat that became tamei from mashkin, that became tamei from tumas sheretz. The Ozder Rameir l'tamei. Rameir went l'shitaso. Rabbi Yosef l'tamei, and Rabbi Yosef also went l'shitaso. In other words, what is their machlokas over there? The Amar tumas mashkin l'tamei acherim d'rabban. Right, as to whether, right, that the liquids, right, the liquids are matami other things midrabanan, right, and that's the machlokas. And in other words, so according to Reb Meir, right, so Reb Meir says l'tami damar tumas mashkin tami achir midrabanan. So he says that which mitami other things is only midrabanan. So therefore, the comparison to the two cases, to the case of the meat, was only on a derabanan level. And the Rabbi Yosef was the Tame that says Damar Tumas Mashkin the Tame Achim Deraisa. It was talking about Deraisa. So therefore, in the initial case of Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim, right, is according to Rabbi Meir, right, that's Deraisa Derabanan, right, and according to Rabbi Yosef, that is Deraisa Deraisa, and therefore, right. And the Tanya, where do we see this machlokes between Rameir and Rabbi Yossi? The Tanya is learned in Brisa. Safek mashkin l'tamei. If you have a case of whether you're unsure as to whether mashkin were matame, so then it's tamei, right? L'tamei acher, but to go ahead and be matame other things, that is tahor. That is only tahor because only the Rabbanan divrei Rameir. V'chein haya Rabbi Eliezer amar kedvarav. And Rabbi Eliezer also said like that of Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he says no, lachol tamei. He says everything is tamei, anything that touches, even as a suffix. And Rabbi Yossi, right, who's that one in our case? Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon Aimin la'oichlin tamein. When it touches other food, then is tamei even deraisa, the kalim. But when it comes to other utensils, right, if it touches those, then it's tahor. So we see from this brisa, there's a machlokes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi, that according to Rabbi Meir, it's only matame on midrabanan, but according to Rabbi Yossi, right, that which is matame other things, other foods, right, it even in deraisa. So therefore, since it's deraisa, therefore you can go ahead and compare it to our case of being matame from one meat to the other. All right, we'll stop here. I know it's a lot to get into, to delve into. I have no idea how tomorrow's is going to look, but I know this sugya goes for 7 days until the end of the parak, I believe, on the Chaf Aleph. So Chaf Aleph is the end of the sugya, but it's a week of Tuma Tahara. So we'll just buckle up and we'll have to buckle up and get there. But all right, hopefully we'll have a.
Can't wait, Rabbi. Yosef and I are very excited about that.
We'll see you guys. This is a minute just started, but 8:30, Kins, and otherwise have a good day and a good week. Bye-bye.